Welcome to the video. A couple of weeks ago, I took this 2021 Giant TCR Advanced Pro disc out on a gravel path. A couple of gravel paths actually. And what I did was I wanted to see if a modern day road bike, even though it's a few years old, I wanted to see if a modern day race road bike can do double duty as of course, a road bike and a light duty, or, push it to its limits and see how far I could actually take it. And I've got to say, I was actually pretty impressed with the results, so I want to talk about them today. All right, I'll be looking at my notes. So the first thing I want to talk about is the bike. I actually really enjoy the way this bike rides, feels. I know this bike well. I know how it rides. I know how it feels. I've done a century ride on this bike before, about a year ago. So this bike is very comfortable for riding all day. I actually got a professional bike fit back when I bought this bike. So I know this bike, I know how it handles, I know how agile it is. I'm super comfortable on this bike. If I was gonna go 50 miles per hour, which is way too fast, I want to do it on this bike because I know how this bike handles. It's stable at speed, although it's agile, so if you need to maneuver yourself around an obstacle like roots, for example, a couple weeks ago when I was riding gravel on it, very comfortable, very confident on this bike. So for a modern day race road bike without any gimmicks like Trek's ISO speed or any sort of smoothing, dampening stuff built into the frame, just for a stiff race bike, it's very smooth, very comfortable. I do have 30mm road tubeless tires on it, Schwalbe Pro 1s to be exact, if anyone's wondering. I usually run these tires at about 60 PSI, 55, 60 PSI. I've heard you're not supposed to go above 70 PSI, but 60 PSI seems to be that sweet spot for me on the road. Now, standing up and wrenching the bike back and forth when you're sprinting, the bike, this is the best bike. It's super stiff, it's super agile, and that is the most fun. If you ever get a chance to ride an all-carbon bike, whether it's a TCR or something else, stand up and wrench it back and forth as you're sprinting. It feels like nothing else. That's like the most fun I've had on this bike. So super fast, super agile, very lightweight feeling. And it's relatively smooth over the bumps as well. Again, a lot of that depends on the tire pressure, but you'd think for such a stiff race bike, it would be a lot more jarring. It's actually very smooth, and I'm actually very impressed with this. I'm more impressed with the way this bike rides than something like my Trek Domani, which is right over there. The Trek Domani has the ISO speed built into it, so it's supposed to be super smooth, but honestly, going from that bike to this bike, I can't tell much of a difference in the smoothness and the ride quality of it. This one's a lot more fun and still very smooth over road bumps and over gravel. At one point, I did think that this bike was a bit too big for me, just because I'm 6 feet tall and I could have went with a medium large or a large. However, I did get a bike fit on this. I'm very comfortable. I did get a 100mm stem instead of a 110mm stem, just to shorten the reach a bit, so that made it a lot more comfortable. And like I said, super comfortable on this bike, so I know the bike well. The next thing we're going to talk about when we're riding bikes all day or when we're riding gravel is gearing. This is a Shimano Ultegra Di2. It makes funny sounds, makes cool sounds. Shimano Ultegra Di2. This is the 11 speed. So I talked about there are wires, everything is wired, the shifters don't have their own battery. The one battery is just in here in the seat post. So the bike shifts flawlessly. That's actually really good if you're taking it in less than ideal situations, because you don't have shift cables to get gunked up by the rain or the dirt. Every single shift works absolutely flawlessly, absolutely perfect. The one downside to that is if you do fall and you break your rear derailleur or you break your shifter, it's going to be a lot more expensive to repair or replace. And if it just stops working, it just stops working. Whereas a geared bike, if it stops working, with a mechanically geared bike, with mechanical Ultegra, if it stops working, you can just throw a new cable in there, you can do things. There's more serviceability out in the field, whereas this bike, or with any electronic shifting bike, once it breaks, pretty much. You just have to get it repaired or replaced. That's just one more reason why you should be doing strength training in the gym for your legs. And also, I would encourage everyone to dabble in a single speed, whether you ride a single speed just for training, just for fun, just for around the flats around your neighborhood, or whether you just go out and you take your geared bike and just leave it in one gear purposefully and act like it's a single speed, because you never know when your bike's going to give up on you. This is technology, and with electric shifting, it may give up on you, and you may just be stuck in one gear. So instead of just worrying about that, just try to overcome it. It's going to make you stronger, and it's just going to make you be able to adapt to the situation a lot more. Anyway, tangent over. The gearing. Up front, we've got a 52-36 double chain ring. In the back, I've got an 11-32 11-speed cassette. So the high gear is 52-11. That's too high for me. The low gear is 36-32. When I first got this bike, I thought the gearing would be a little bit heavy, a little bit hard, like a little bit high. However, the gearing is actually totally fine for me. My ideal situation for a 2x gearing would be a 50-34 in the front and an 11-34 in the rear. 50-11, you could still go pretty fast, and I'm not interested in going any faster than 35 miles an hour at my age, honestly. But the 34-34 does give you that 1-to-1 gear ratio, so you can get up pretty much any climb. And like I mentioned before, if you ride single speed and you're doing strength training, you don't skip leg day in the gym, that 1-to-1 gear ratio should be totally fine in most situations. A lot of gravel bikes come with much smaller chain rings. Their low gear they might come with a 46-30 and 11-34 in the back. A lot of the one-bys may just have a 40-tooth chain ring and a 50-tooth big gear in the back. That's very, very, very low. That's great if you're actually doing, a lot of weight on the bike, and if you're really more sitting up, and maybe if you're not in the greatest shape or if you don't ride that much, that's great, but you do lose a lot of the flexibility of riding that bike fast on the road. So I would always say a 2x11 or 2x12 or a 2x drivetrain is better for the road, and it's not as ideal for taking it off-road, but if you just want that one bike that can do road and gravel, 2x, especially with electronic shifting, Shimano electric shifting for the front is just absolutely flawless. No reason not to. A bit harder to clean, but I do like the gearing. I do wish it was a bit lower. I wish I had a 50-34 on the front. However, I'm not going to spend $200 or $300 just to change the chain rings. I'm just going to get stronger, and this is totally fine. Now, the last and final thing that I want to talk about and what makes this bike so versatile is tires. This tire takes up to a 32, or not this tire, this bike takes up to a 32 millimeter wide tire. Currently, I am running Schwalbe Pro 1 30 millimeters, and I'm looking for I have a caliper somewhere. We'll actually do a real world measure of how wide these tires actually are. But 30 millimeter tubeless tires, 28s are usually fine. 28s are actually my favorite width for if you're just riding on the road. You can run the pressures actually low enough where it's actually going to be dampening and actually going to absorb the bumps. However, in my opinion, or not in my opinion, in my experience, 28 millimeter wide tires are a lot more agile than 32 millimeter tires. Trust me, I've tried it. If you're doing stop and go, or 28s are just better if you want speed and you're only going to be on the road. You can do light gravel with 28s, but I would always say you're kind of pushing it if you're doing anything other than just like a quick run here and there on 28 millimeter wide tires. You can still do it if that's all you got. But the reason why I put 30s on here was just to get that little bit of extra comfort and a little bit of extra grip and to run the lower pressure on this bike, because I figured why not. 28s are fast and agile, whereas 32s you can do a lot more gravel than on 28s and you can run considerably lower pressure, like 15 psi lower. I didn't want to sacrifice all that speed and agility, but I didn't want to give up all of the versatility of the wider tires by just going with what's nowadays a narrow tire, 28 millimeter wide tire. So the 30 millimeter road tires are perfect for me. Now, I do have a lot of other options I have a set of wheels over there with 32 millimeter all-road tires. I have 32 millimeter gravel tires. I could have put wider tires on, but the reason why I didn't do that a couple of weeks ago, if you don't see the video, check it out. It'll be linked up here and linked in the description, was I wanted to simulate if you're out on a road ride on your road bike and it's not optimized for gravel at all. You've got racing slick tires like this bike does. I wanted to see, can you just spur the moment, just say I'm riding road, there's a gravel path, let me go ahead and take that left or take that right. For me, everything was off to the left when I was riding a few weeks ago on my gravel paths. Let me just take that turn and see where it goes. And I've got to say, you absolutely can. You've got to be careful with the tire pressure. You've got to be careful with the grip. Everyone saw that short that I uploaded. I pumped the tire pressure up a bit too high, and then a diagonal route actually almost took me out. That was a bit scary, so you do have to go slow if you don't know the course, you don't know the trails, especially if it's wet. Remember, with slick tires like this, you don't have any grip. So you really have to be careful, or if you're running something like the SPDs where you can unclip easily, or better yet, flat pedals so you can ride a pair of Vans like I'm wearing right now, you can put your foot down a lot easier. I would say I would say mountain bike pedals or flat pedals with just regular Vans or winter boots with a flat sole. Those are going to be good, because if you're running the road slicks, the racing slicks, you never know, you might actually go down. And I actually did find that was a bit dangerous. So you can do it. I would say just exercise caution, do it at your own risk. And tire pressure, maybe drop the tire pressure 5 or 10 psi. I didn't realize that my tire pressure for the first part of the ride was actually at 30 psi. I kept bottoming out on the back wheel when I was going over over roots. So I pumped it up to about 60 psi, and then I was flying. But then I was too confident, I was overconfident, I was cocky, and I was flying over roots, and then that root almost took me out. So definitely can do it. Next time, would I do it? Yeah, I would do it just for fun. I would definitely I would exercise a lot of caution, because the narrower the tire, the less grip you have, and especially a tire like this. So overall, the TCR actually did great as a lightweight gravel bike. It's lighter than a gravel bike, number one, and also it's good for light gravel to medium duty gravel. And if you encounter something like, I think I saw a couple of times the trail was just broken up, and I just unclipped and walked. It's totally fine to do if you walk for 2 minutes, or if you get stuck in sand and you got to walk. You're still getting through the trail, and I'd still rather do that than just have to optimize my bike just to take huge tires and low gearing. Because where I live in New York City, and even if I go out to Long Island, I have to ride on the road for a long time before I get to any gravel. So I'd rather sacrifice that little bit of gravel performance from the tires and have faster running road tires than I would having really thick, let's say 38 or 42 millimeter wide gravel tires, and they're going to be like slugs. They're just going to be super slow on the road. And maybe it would be different if I had gravel right at my front doorstep. I don't have that. I'd always recommend either a 28 to 32 millimeter all-road tire, depending on what your goals are. So that's the TCR. That's how it did on gravel. I think you could definitely do it. Invest in a separate set of wheels, or invest in a separate set of tires. Maybe put on some 32 millimeter all-road tires if you want to do road and gravel. You don't need to buy a second bike unless you want to. I mean, it's up to you. It's always great to have more bikes, but I'm trying to pare my items down, and if I can get the most out of one thing, that just means I don't have to actually go ahead and buy a second, third, or fourth bike, because then that's just more bikes I have to worry about, more chains, more maintenance, more hydraulic fluid, more tires. It's just more you have to manage. So really take a look at what your needs are, and if your needs are similar to mine, I think a road bike with some narrower gravel tires and 30 or 32 millimeter width will be fine. So as always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.